So welcome to the Sinclair podcast. We're going to be talking today about your inner superhero and everything going on with the big superhero craze these days and through the years. I'm Mike Sawyer, Director of Web Media here at Sinclair, and we'll go around the horn and introduce everybody in case this is your first episode, and tell us your name and what you do here and a little bit of your experience. Okay.
My name is Safdar Chaudhary. I'm a psychiatrist here.
I'm Omair Chaudhary. I'm an assistant of the Dr. Chaudhary.
Hi, I'm Tirzah Mason. I'm a therapist here at Sinclair.
And I am Rachel Kuszaj, and I'm a PA student from Duquesne University visiting with Dr. Chaudhary for the next month.
Fantastic. And everybody excuse the myriad of voices I hear in the background. It's not just in your head. There's a lot of activity over here today. It's a very busy Friday, so there'll be a lot going on. Tirzah, this is a subject that you brought up about the inner superhero. Can you tell us a little bit to start us off? What made you think we should be talking about this?
Well, there is a lot going on, and this is a timely topic for Pittsburgh because we have people in town filming the next installment of the Batman series, and a lot of our listeners, or some of our listeners, may have actually been at Heinz Field recently as part of the huge crew. You were a huge crew hosts, yes. of extras who showed up to film the first scene, I think, of the movie. At Heinz Field, and so it's not just because someone's filming a film here. I think Batman is one of those superheroes that has held us enthralled for many years, and Superman, of course, and so superheroes have been part of the American scene for a long time. And it occurred to me that I don't know, I was reading somewhere about how during times of economic crisis and economic depression, superhero stories become very important for people. And of course, Superman came about during the first depression in the 1900s. And here we are having another worldwide financial crisis. And what's happening? You look in the summer blockbusters, most of them were superheroes. Thor and Iron Man 2 and Cowboys and Aliens, which is a little bit less of a superhero movie, but I liked it anyway. And what else? We've got Green Lantern and X-Men, the prequel. Mm-hmm. So these stories are compelling, and so I was curious to know, why are they compelling? Why do these stories keep coming up? Why do we care about them? And what do they mean to us? And what about our own superhero? Is it always just the hero out there that saves us? What about how do we save ourselves? And so I thought it would be fun to have this conversation.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Well, okay, of course, Superman came up in the Depression. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the first iconic thing that's lasted over the years, at least that everybody thinks about. Mm-hmm. Batman was one that came out that was a little bit of a different view. Mm-hmm. So,
how do you see the difference? Talk about the difference between.
Well, Superman was very red, white, and blue. America, was presented as the best a human being could offer, and Batman came out, and it was a normal person with a very dark turn on it, a very psychological effect on people. Right. The line is, the criminals are a cowardly lot, and we need an image to strike fear in them, and that's his advantage to it. But that didn't always last. We saw in the 60s. We saw Adam West. That's Batman. And I think that speaks a lot to what happened in society.
Yeah, Adam West really believed he was Batman. I think he still insists that he is. He is Batman. So he has embraced that superhero as his own. But so many people have, and Batman is very compelling because he is a normal person, because the recent movies have shown that aspect of Batman's personality, the struggling hero, somebody who was hurt and took that hurt and turned it into something positive. But that hurt's always there, in the background, and he's in a bat cave, and he struggles with his house, his butler, who is also kind of a psychological mentor for him, super ego figure, who tries to hold him accountable, and he gets into a lot of trouble. And these are, this is the modern version of Batman. I'm really excited to see what happens with the next installment, because those are pretty exciting movies. So why is this important? Why do we go to these movies? Why do we care about these heroes?
Well, for that reason where we just talked about how Batman is the normal human being and he becomes this superhero in times of crisis, I think that's why everyone is so fascinated by this. If you've been downtown recently or in the Oakland area, it's basically impossible to get street to street without running into some type of barrier or crowds of people sitting on the sidewalk trying to see something. So for that reason, I think people relate a lot that we are all normal individuals, normal human beings with our own strengths, our own weaknesses, and at times of crisis or at times when we have to fight that villain, we have to fight that unwanted emotion or that trial or tribulation that presents itself within our life, we have to stand up for ourselves, we have to embrace our superpowers. That isn't always that easy to do. And then there's times of happy emotions and good times and overcoming obstacles that superhero is brought out in us. I think that a lot of people do relate to Batman more nowadays, at least for my generation. That's the big name. That's why this movie happening right now is such a phenomenon in the Pittsburgh area, because that's what we see. We see both sides, we relate to both sides, and it just captures the interest and people run with it.
And sometimes that villain is inside ourselves,
Absolutely.
Certainly Batman struggles with his own demons, and I think of the Hulk as a great example of that. Here's someone who struggles with his rage and becomes this Hulk whenever his rage gets out of control. What an iconic thing
How
for
many
this,
of us do
for
that,
this
though?
culture.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We might not turn green, but exactly. You get frustrated, you get angered, you become this person that you're not normally. It's out of your control.
But yet he's not just a destructive force.
Absolutely.
There's also that positive struggle.
Absolutely. It gets brought out within him.
And through the years with Hulk, I know I've read a few that there's actually a bit of an inner conversation between the two sides of his persona. That's really interesting. And sometimes they make deals with each other. So, and kind of on that, we talk about Superman is a very kind of like, seems like the perfection of humanity kind of idea. But then Marvel amongst I think around the 60s, we started to see the X-Men, Spider-Man, and Hulk. Stan Lee often says, he wanted to create characters that had human problems. You see Fantastic Four, you see a lot of they're a family. And there's a lot of family issues that happen with that. And like you saw the movies, like they have infighting. It's not just, hey, I'm super out of powers and everything's perfect all the time.
Right. These people aren't perfect. So it's the introduction in the 60s of the anti-hero. The person who's...
Not so much the anti-hero, just kind of like a normal person with powers.
Yeah.
To say even these people with these powers aren't completely perfect.
So having those powers doesn't save you from the difficulties of living.
Exactly.
Having those powers often presents you with more difficulties.
Right. Good point.
And make the choices.
Darn, I don't want to be Superman today. I don't want to be Spider-Man today. My Spidey sense, I wish I could turn it off.
Well, I had not watched movies a whole lot. That's not an area of my interest. But I got dragged into that by my children. So Omair is an example of that. But I get fascinated by the number of people who are present for such movies. And that has always intrigued me. And why is that? Because as a psychiatrist, I began to kind of look at human behaviors and began to see why people do what they do. And so this conversation is of great interest to me for my own learning as to why during the times of depression or times of difficulties, we as a culture or society or people or group of people begin to behave in a certain manner where we are looking for those powers and some external ways to be okay. But we see that in our practices, though, where people struggle to begin to find that inner wounded individual and yet that ability to be okay all the time. It's happening all the time. And we were talking to somebody yesterday, and she's a phenomenal artist. And yet, as she's getting better, and we are encouraging her to bring that art to the awareness of other people, she does not want to do it herself because she's so wounded. She feels she's not capable of doing that. Somebody else should do that. There's a lot of shame and not feeling okay. This is very interesting. This is a very interesting conversation for a psychiatrist to learn.
Yeah, what do you think? You're the psychiatrist's son. Okay. You described yourself as the assistant. Is that the positive power is the assistant? What's the shadow side of that?
Well, I mean, I like to watch all the heroic movies and like the goddess and goddesses and all that kind of stuff. I remember when I was very little, I used to watch the movie Hercules, and I was so fascinated with the strength and powers and all that kind of stuff. I told my dad that I wanted to buy the Hercules sword. So I bought the sword, and like every single day I used to fight with my brother using the sword, like pretending I was like this big superhero. And fortunately it got to him that I'm using it too much, so he took it away from me.
And this is
and the shadow side emerges.
And this is some of the problems of a superhero.
Take your powers
Absolutely.
away.
That's right.
But
Father of a superhero, hindering his abilities.
But I watched the movie Thor about 2 months ago, and I really liked that movie because it was it was just very fascinating how different people think of the different worlds and stuff like that. And I told my dad about the movie, and I told him to watch it, but unfortunately he never likes to watch movies, so he never got to it. But
Now I will. No, there's a reason.
but like around the house, like I always get these, like I always feel like I'm a superhero or a bad person, like, or the Hulk, like whatever. Someone around the house or a family member or someone makes me mad, I feel like I want to turn green and like destroy everything around the house. And then, like, if anything around, I feel like I'm like a superhero or the god or something like that. I used to have dreams that I used to go up in heaven and fight with God himself. So I just always wanted to see how that feeling would be to fight with the powerful,
The ultimate authority.
yeah. And
The ultimate dad. It's got to be hard living with a psychiatrist.
You get used to it.
What I was saying, that the reason his sword was taken away because he had sacrificed many plants as well. The plants that I loved.
Those villains. Those house plant villains.
So when I come
House
back
plant
home, I was yearning to see that rose that was about to blossom, and many of those blossoms had already been sacrificed. But nevertheless, now I understand the reason
Unfortunately, a
behind
sibling
that.
had not been sacrificed to this sword.
That's right. The sibling survived.
Take what you can get.
That's right.
But just like Omair was saying, when he was younger and he wanted to become that Hercules, he wanted to be that hero, that god. I think people run with that idea that sometimes you have to see it to believe it. You have to see that someone else has that power, that someone else has that weakness, to accept it within yourself and tell yourself that it's okay to have these talents, these extraordinary things I can offer, but it's okay to maybe be shameful of them or to maybe be afraid to expose them to other people. And whether you flat out realize it or subconsciously realize it while watching these movies, while seeing, wow, this person does have all of these weaknesses, yet they're still a superhero. So I don't think it all has to be written out right in front of you for it to just smack you in the face. I think that subconsciously, that's why
subliminal
people
message,
are so fascinated by it. They run with this idea of strengths and weaknesses, but at the end of the day, still coming out the good guy.
Even the toys are going to come out with the Green Lantern. I know they're going to have like the rings and stuff like that. So all the kids are going to go out and buy the costumes, buy
Not
the
just
rings.
the kids, the people at every podcast. They bought every color ring.
They're
It's
going to do
crazy.
the whole thing, yeah. And then they're going to run around.
Go into a Comic-Con and seeing grown men ranging from teenager to 50s, and they're dressed as Green Lantern, as Superman and everything. I mean, it's not just kids, definitely, and it's very apparent when you go to these things.
Well, the messages in these movies, are not simple messages. They're not just about good and bad. Take Thor, for example, which I thought was extremely well done. Kenneth Branagh, who directed, is schooled in the Shakespearean tradition, and he's a fine actor himself, and he really understands mythology. He really understands the power of mythology and the need that we have for archetypes. And so he creates in this retelling of the Thor story, the story of two brothers, okay, who are at odds with each other. They love each other, that's clear, but they're also at odds with each other over the attention of their father. The Cain and Abel story. I mean, there it is. It's from the very beginning. This has concerned us as human beings, and so Thor is the prince. He gets everything. He's wonderful. He's going to inherit the kingdom, and he's an arrogant prick. He really is. I can't say that on the podcast, but that's what he is. He's arrogant. And so he doesn't learn anything about being a human because he's a spoiled brat. Exactly. And he doesn't learn anything about being a human until he has to go down and muck about with the humans. And then he learns something. But I thought that the transformation of Loki was even more interesting because Loki is the brother who turns out not to be the biological child of the father. He's really not even a half brother. He's been adopted from what's the group of people?
The Ice Giants.
The Ice Giants, right? Who are the antithesis of the good guys, right? And he kind of stands behind. He doesn't have much power. A little bit passive aggressive.
He's the god of mischief.
The god of mischief. Yeah, Coyote and some of the Western stories. He's the god of mischief, and he. In the face of him, he seems very subservient, very sweet, very kind, but he's plotting a lot of times to find power because he doesn't have real power. And so then he gets real power, and of course he misuses it, and he creates the ultimate split between the worlds because of this. But at the end, he sacrifices himself in the interest of healing, which I thought was really significant. It was a neat character. So I think Brenda did a great job of illustrating those conflicts that we all face. Most of us have siblings, if not siblings, at least other people that act as siblings, and we have to figure out how do we get the attention of the people with the power, the parents who take away our swords and value their roses more than us and our superpowers. How do we get their attention?
It was just in the sword. There was other stuff,
and that's for our next podcast.
And even there's a common theme between even Green Lantern and Captain America this summer. They were both kind of demonstrated the power of willpower. Right. Green Lantern is built around that. In the story with that is the green light is willpower, and they have all other lights for all the different other emotions. It's really interesting when they start having their little wars in comics. But it's about will and about a guy being deputized for basically a galactic army or a galactic police force. I'm sorry. And then dealing with that new responsibility, and can he do it? Does he believe in himself to do it? Because what you believe in yourself conveys physically in this ring and in his power. Captain America was a scrawny kid that wanted to be in World War II really bad, wanted to fight, and they asked, "Why do you want to go kill Nazis?" Says, "No, I don't like bullies. I don't want to kill anybody." So they pick him. Serum, all that fun science, fantastical stuff. But his willpower turned him into, the best soldier, Whereas the same serum for the bad guy at the Red Skull turned him into this red-faced, evil, person.
He was ugly looking. He was.
Although Hugo Weaving is amazing. Yeah. But again, and there's even that commonality just across films in just this summer.
So why now? Why are all these things coming back now? Is there a relationship between the sense of fear and despair and hopelessness that we sense out there because we're hearing daily, the economies of the world are collapsing or getting difficult. The climate is an enormous problem. We're already seeing that changes have happened to the climate that we're not going to be able to repair.
But I don't see Captain Planet coming back.
Captain Planet?
Remember Captain Planet?
I think the people are the heroes in all this big catastrophe going on because they need to realize that they need to shape up in order for the global warming to stop, or the stock market to stop crashing down, and people losing their jobs, they need to realize that they need to change the way they live and do what, you know, people are telling them to do. Like, you hear all these different movies about, you know, if you guys don't do this, this is going to happen.
You know, an inconvenient truth.
Yeah, and they give you all the truth, and people don't like to listen to it. But now, since it's actually happening, now they're all panicking and they don't know what to do. So they should, you know.
There are a lot of interesting themes that are coming up these days in comic books, and I think you see a little bit of it in the Dark Knight series. I just recently rewatched Dark Knight this past week since my movie experience. But there's a lot of stuff, like, you know, in the world of Batman. What happens when Batman goes away? They recently had a death of Batman. What does the police force do when we don't have Batman to take care of all these crazies?
When all the superheroes are gone,
exactly.
People are panicking. They don't know what to do. They rely on
So
him.
there's a lot of examples of people that step up. I'm amazed that they're developing series that are just regular people that live in these worlds, dealing with all this craziness around them.
Well, and that really is what needs to happen. You know, here we are living in a world where what we've done before and the stories that we told ourselves before that built the institutions that we live in are no longer effective. They're no longer working. We can no longer treat the world the way we treated them based on the old myths. Okay, and so we need a new set of myths. We needed a new set of myths starting with the first Great Depression. And we still need it. But we don't need those heroes out there to fix it for us. We need those heroes to be models for how we can learn to fix it for ourselves. And that's what we try to do in therapy as well. You know, the idea in therapy is for our clients to become their own best therapists, so that they don't need us constantly. And if that doesn't happen, then we haven't been very successful. If we haven't allowed our patients to grow to the point where they can find the resources in themselves and around them to be able to heal and to live balanced lives and to find wellness, then we haven't done our jobs. So, you know, I think you're right, Omair. This is the struggle, and I find it kind of exciting that the way heroes are portrayed now, with, as we said, with an integration of the light and dark, is really where we need to go. Because until we accept that human beings, fallible as we are a combination of wonderful the power to love and create and to make community, and also the power to destroy and to be hateful and to hurt, and we're both of those things, and we can't take one part of ourselves and throw it out there and dismiss it and project it on somebody else or something else and still live a whole life. So we're starting, I think, through these myths, through the way in which these myths are being portrayed now, to understand that dynamic, that dialectic, that we have to synthesize good and bad in ourselves and in our society to be able to make the changes we need to make.
And I just want to bring in a bit of an international perspective. I was talking to my brother-in-law in Pakistan, and he said, I wish all the ammunition and all the armies and everything that's descending in this area, it would just go away, so that we can get back to our goats, our camels, and our places where we would just use to grow vegetables and then just be okay with that. And at this point in time, the amount of fear, and I remember growing up as a child in Pakistan, Afghanistan was a very simple place where people just lived, and we would hear stories and songs. My remembrance of Afghanistan is just a radio station. And I remember we used to hear the best songs from the radio station. That is my memory of Afghanistan. But if we fast forward that now, the present memories are wars and tragedies and helicopter being crashing and all that kind of stuff. And that is now descending into Pakistan. And more people are beginning to recognize, and this is almost like the whole country is getting hostage to this whole fear, and the idea is, people are saying, well, there are 5 or 10 people or 20 people, 30 people or 100 or whatever, they're out there with all these guns and ammunition, and everybody else is so scared. But where can they go? They really don't have a place to just run away from, their own homes. But I think where I kind of take on that is, the fear, whether it's the economical fear, or whether it's the tragedy of fear of a whole nation, or a tragedy of a fear of any sort, or fear of somebody who may have traumatized in our life when we were young, when we feel vulnerable and have no control over that, that's when the whole environment becomes so fearful and it just changes the life. And very toxic. And it's very important that we begin to bring in that sense of community and a sense of belonging and sense of peace and sense of wisdom, because that's when things thrive. And by destructive forces, we just destroy more, and then we get more destruction back. And so maybe it is time to look at our present-day myth of fears of others and return to the understanding of, are we just fearful of what? And that question has to be asked from our own self. I just kind of walked into, this is not related, but it's kind of related. I was at Walmart yesterday buying a small object, and a person just walked up to me and started to have a small conversation. And I knew he wanted to have a small conversation. And in that conversation, he quickly got to the point that he probably wanted to have a conversation about. He goes, he talked about politics. He talked about Obama and the economics. And this is just in Walmart.
Someone you have never met before.
You've never met before.
And it's in Walmart, exactly. There's a lot of problems with this to start off with, but continue.
And then he makes 3 different points. I could see the fear in him, how he apparently had an injury and could no longer work. And then his second thing was, he made the point of saying how he wants to find salvation out of his difficulties. And he goes, I hope that you're a Christian, because that's the only way to find salvation. But I could tell that his religion played an important role in his life. And then he goes on to make the comment of how he cannot trust the politicians anymore. And he hopes that communities and people can make a difference. And those are really his take-home points. And so I came back with more than what I went to buy. But it's very interesting. It's in a common person's mind.
Absolutely.
The issues of
it's in my mind too. It's not just in his mind.
That is because we are common persons.
Absolutely. I would like to see Consensus Man, as a new superhero.
Truthfully.
Really?
Yeah, he asked him, I hope you are a Christian. And how often do people say, I hope you are a Democratic, I hope you are a Republican? So without that superhero, certainly the politicians aren't to be trusted. They're no longer our heroes. So without that has to be set aside. We have to find it within ourselves to, as a nation, make the improvement, make the difference.
Well, and it's not an easy task,
No, absolutely not.
I think about what's been happening in the Middle East and in the Arab countries with the Arab Spring, and people really conquering fear. One of us is leaving, and they're shutting the door. Bye, Omair. Thanks a lot.
One of our heroes is leaving.
Might as well. He's going to get his sword.
Sword out
of the
I better watch out.
Yep, say goodbye to your plans.
He's going to come back and kerplunk somebody.
Those roses are gone. But we've all watched the news and just been amazed at the way large numbers of people who previously had really been oppressed by systems that were quite dangerous. If you were objecting to the status quo, then you could be carried off someplace and never seen again. And yet large groups of people were saying no to that and saying we want something different. And they brought down governments, which is pretty significant. But now they have the task of, well, what do we do now? How do we construct the kind of society that we say we want, that we didn't have? And there's a lot of fear in that. And so if people just embrace the fear, then ultimately what happens is the same thing. Some new despot will arise, and somebody else will take control and try to decide for everyone. And we've seen that kind of thing happen over and over. And as a country, we supported that kind of thing happening over and over.
There's the Nazis were a figure that stepped up and was bigger than life, became their superhero, and unfortunately had bad tendencies.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting to see what we do with it. If we can understand that we have to confront our fear, we have to listen to our fear as to every emotion, and not try to project it out there and put it out there and away from us and deny it. If we do that, we'll do the same kinds of things we did before. But if we can embrace it, if we can be kind to ourselves and to each other and think about these things, then we have the chance of making something new, of creating the kind of world that the superheroes talk about wanting to have. justice and fairness and mercy and all of that, because that's their mottos, all of them, and that's what we want, but we never quite figure out how to get there. And I'm encouraged that the kinds of superheroes we're seeing today are providing maybe an archetype or a model for that we haven't seen before.
Real quick, I want to touch on probably last thing we have time for, the anti-hero, the rise of this. People are into people like the Punisher, or you can see actually, Batman to a point could be a little bit of an anti-hero. He was more of a darker vigilante, but you see more of like the Sin City kind of stuff, or the
Dexter.
Dexter,
yes,
Dexter,
a
serial killer.
Serial killer only kills serial killers.
Exactly. Is like people that don't follow the rules, but think they're doing the right thing, have their own methods. Wolverine's a big popular one right now, and Wolverine's one will do whatever he needs to do. He's not really on the straight and narrow, has a sordid past and everything.
But he has a moral code. There's a code.
He does have a moral code. He has a code of samurai. Geeking out a little bit, but when you think about the rise of this in the past, I want to say that started probably in the late 80s, around the time where Batman went dark again. So what changed there to rise these up?
The 80s have been described as the me generation in this country. As the time when people were concerned about themselves and not about the greater community. And we saw some of the economics of that in the Reagan era, voodoo economics that we're still paying the price for some of those choices that we've made. The idea that I've got mine. If you don't have yours, well, there's something wrong with you. Not understanding what the price of community is in terms of balancing community and individuality. So maybe some of that either reflected that trend or was a reaction to that trend. We look at the kinds of movies that are coming out. A lot of times people want to blame Hollywood for things, but movies are either a reflection of what reality is out there, or they're a reaction to it and trying to provide another way of looking at things. And so, what's happening now with superheroes? Maybe a little bit of both.
I think that's a good point to end this on. I think it was a great conversation. And everybody's going to go see Captain America.
Absolutely.
So,
thank you.
And you have to catch up and see Thor.
Yeah, I will now, knowing it has a purpose.